All right, according to this clock, it's actually a minute after. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the sort of logistical piece of calling roll. Seth, will you call roll, please?
Yvonne Curtis.
Here.
Mark Mulvihill. Here. David Reeves.
Here.
Lynn Saxton. Kay Duran. Kim Williams.
Present.
Okay, we do believe that Kay will be joining us, so we'll welcome her when she does. I'd like to, so I called the meeting to order at 2:01. So I look for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any votes in opposition to approving the agenda? Okay, we'll move forward. Next, I'll entertain a motion to to approve they're just notes, so I don't know that we need to approve them, do we? They're just notes. Okay, so I guess we're good on that one. So just briefly to call out on our agenda, I think we have really just two main items that we're really going to focus on, and that is the review of the outcomes and investment subcommittee presentation that we presented earlier, and then the strategic investments, actually three parts: strategic investment, and then what we're going to do with the rest of the recommendations that we've taken a look at. Let me look at my notes for... Yeah, she does ask for a motion on the meeting notes, but if it's not an official agenda, minutes, we don't do.
I don't. Do we have notes here? They are notes,
Yes.
and we can take a vote to have them in the record.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to put the notes from July 8th meeting, which was a phone conversation, I believe. Was that the one? Yeah. Into our official record.
So moved.
Second? Looking for a second?
I second.
Thank you. Anybody opposed? All right, we'll move forward on that one. So now we're going to take a few minutes, and we have about 15 minutes to do what I think is really two big pieces. One is review the review of outcomes and investments to the subcommittee, that presentation from OEIB, and the other is to think about what is our work going forward. So first I'd like to ask the committee for any reflections from the OEIB planning meeting. At that meeting, you got a chance to see our top two recommendations that went to the outcomes and investment subcommittee. So just kind of asking for reflections at this point. I'm going to start with David because he's right here.
Okay. What were those top two ones we had identified previously again?
Let me find him. They're actually in this week's presentation too. I want to make sure I state them right. What we're looking for were the two that we recommended to the strategics investment. Just to review.
It was the Spanish assessment. So
It's
it's
the
this one,
benchmarking?
number one. See, they're coded.
Yes, and
number
educator
two.
quality.
That's
So in
correct.
your PowerPoint, it would be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, slide number 4.
And did you tell folks?
And slide
to go-
18.
Did you tell folks to go ahead and print off what I sent today?
No, I did not. Hilda just joined us. You want to say that?
Yes, to make it easier, given my memories from the last time where we tried to operate on a phone, I sent you all a Word document that you can pull up that makes it quite easy for us to go through these. I see David has his with him.
Yeah, I think the process went pretty well at the last OEIB meeting and seemed to get a lot of buy-in from the board. So I think the real question is how we're going to move forward on these and really implement them. So I'd like to discuss that a little bit more.
Okay. Anybody on the phone? Mark? Kim?
I don't have anything at this time, Yvonne.
Okay.
Me neither. You.
Okay. So we also want to think about the work that we're going to do in the coming year. So let me frame that with the work we're going to do today. Today we're going to look over what we have titled Draft Policy Recommendations for Best Practices. And David asked a really good question about how's that different from what we did last time. Remember when we were on the phone, we were looking at all of these recommendations and prioritizing 2 of them that we wanted to move forward to the Outcomes and Investments Committee to move forward for funding. All of the rest of them were things that we were either going to call out as best practice and know that they're in progress, but we wanted to emphasize that they were worthy of note and of moving forward. Others were tasks that we were all actually handing off to other departments and other committees that are doing the work. Some of them were policy changes, and then the 2 that we sent forward were strategic investments. So because we've already pretty much handled those 2, we're really kind of looking at the rest of them today. So when you think about the whole year and how we organized ourselves, if you look at the color-coded chart where we said that we were going to look at recommendations around best practices for the yellow part, which was K-12 student transitions, the green, which was student transitions 11 to 14, purple, which was educator quality, orange, which is transforming learning through digital conversion, and then the rose color, rural and remote communities. So we listened to presentations, we got information, and we put together what we're going to go over in a little bit. So as we think about that whole scope of the work for this year, I'm open to just some brainstorm ideas about how we organize ourselves for next year, because our next meeting is coming up soon, and Hilda and I are already talking about what's on the agenda for the next meeting. So, David, I know you said there were some things you wanted to mention. Was it about how we did our work this year, or more specifically about our recommendations?
Yeah, I just like to make sure we do the follow-up on these recommendations. So
Okay.
that'll help inform us as we go ahead for next year.
Yvonne,
Yes?
along that line, what David, where he was going on the follow-up, I'm just looking through them. Do we want to identify the recommendations for the stakeholders? Like, for instance,
agenda item.
is that the next one, Hilda?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the
that's
next
what we're
item.
doing next. So I don't know, maybe it might be better to kind of hold this why don't we do this? Throw out any ideas you have. We'll come back to this question after we go through these items and we're all clear what we're going to do with them. Then that might help inform our work for next
Yeah,
time.
I just felt as though, the board at their planning meeting had an opportunity to kind of talk about processes, and this was a good chance for Yvonne to get feedback and for me to get feedback on how I can best support the work of this committee. I'm thrilled that I can stay with it next year, and to get a better sense of what worked well, and, is there anything that you would tell us? And then I think we also have the luxury of spending some time maybe later today in actually starting to identify the kinds of topics that we want to either revisit, open new topics, go deeper into student transition issues, and the like.
Okay, I guess, my thought, if we're looking at today umbrella investments, then I'm fine the way it's written. Hilda, I think you've done a really, really nice job of synthesizing all of these conversations over the last year. I don't know if this is in our purview for today or not, but when I look at these, there are a lot of activities assigned to various audiences.
Right.
I don't know if that's today or not. If today we're looking at just approving the umbrella, I'm good with that. But I think for suggestions in the future for next year, I would like to hold on to these, not create new ones, but really look at who's initiating what within each one of those.
Hear you.
Thank you, Mark. Kim, any other general comments?
No, thank you for asking.
Okay.
No, right. And this is Kay. I am on the line. I don't know that I mentioned myself when I got on.
Thank you, Kay, for letting us know you're there. Go ahead, Kay. Did you have something to add?
No, I didn't have anything to add. Just wanted to
Okay.
let you know I'm here.
David?
I just think something to add, it did come out of the last OEIB, is that we should be looking a lot at the transitions, both from early learning to elementary, and then from high school to college. And that's really something the OEIB can do, is being a board at its level. So just something to keep in mind as we move forward and we look at these further issues today.
Thank you for mentioning that, and that's exactly what Hilda and I were kind of already thinking about. Those are two areas where we probably want to dig. They're already on our scope of work, so for this year, we just want to, as Mark is saying, go deeper and look at the ones we've already called out and see, are there any pieces that are emerging, that are new, that are best practice, and so on. One example is, as early learning is, now we'll have more hubs identified, they'll have had more time working with them. What are some best practices that they're learning about, and where do they need our help and support? Where do we need to call out, and so on. So I think those are two great areas. So it says those two areas on our scope of work we want to keep a hold of. And I also hear follow up on the specific recommendations we make to make sure we're getting somewhere on them, I think is what you're saying, right? Okay, I want to call out, before we even start going through the next agenda item, which is actually the report out on our scope of work, there is an area that I think we need to come back to that was in the work. It would fall under the equity work for ELLs. If you remember, we had Stand for Children come to us with a report about what they felt might be missing in terms of information parents get and teachers get about ELLs. We had some dialogue with ODE, and they are working on some things. There's also a new set of standards and a new ELPA assessment. So we know they're working through some things. One of our suggestions is that we definitely hold on to that piece and bring it back, have maybe a recommendation to ODE, David at ODE, that he meet with Standard Children, listen to see if they've addressed all of those, and then report back to us on that. That's one area that we noticed is not in our report out here.
And in a way, it is a type of transition. In this case,
Right.
transition
Continually.
through and out of a program.
Yeah. And was there one more, Hilda? I'm already forgetting.
No, that was,
the main one. So as we go into this next budget item, agenda item, I want the committee to think about, is there anything missing that you said, wait, I think we heard some report or we talked about something, where is it here? That's one thing. I want you to listen for the language as we look at each one and say, have we captured it the way it ought to be captured? Or is there anything missing in the item? And then what to do with any other strategic investments that didn't end up in our top two. So that's a lot of work.
and is it still a high?
Oh, and is it still a high priority? Because these are the ones we said were high priorities. So let's start into what I'm looking at is the PowerPoint, and I know you have now another chart where it's put together on just a few pages.
Yeah, I thought this one would be easier for people to mark on as they go through, and they wouldn't have to be flipping as many pages, and we have a relatively small audience here, so we've got handouts for them as well.
So first I want to point you to the first page of the PowerPoint that says types of recommendations, just to make sure we're all clear. Hilda's done a great job of coding on each page what kind of recommendation it is. So some of them are strategic investments, and the top two are identified in the PowerPoint with a number 1 little blue ribbon at the bottom and a number 2. Some items are labeled as PC, which is rules or policies that would influence needed changes, and those will be recommended to legislator
Or to
legislator
agencies.
Or agencies, okay? BP means best practice in the progress worthy of note and continued focus. And T is a task that's suggested action for further future consideration. Gosh, I'm sorry. I'm tripping over my words. So we'll start with the first category is K through 12 student transitions. I don't think it's a great idea for me to read them to you. You have them in front of you. So I'm just going to pause at each one, give you a chance to look at it and see if that particular one is high priority? Are we missing anything? Is it capturing the language the way you want it written? Especially if you were working on that little subcommittee of the subcommittee.
And let me point out a couple of things. I think it might be easier if we all use this Word document, and I just say that because I think it's
Okay,
a little clearer. The very first one here was the strategic investment that was submitted to the Outcomes and Investments Group. We don't know the outcome of that yet. One potential thing that we could do is to try to get a better cost estimate so that we are prepared if asked at some point, what is this going to cost? I was under one misimpression at the Outcomes and Investments Committee. I wasn't there, but I think somehow they've walked away with an impression that it would impact 7,500 students. And actually, because we're really only talking about a small portion of students at elementary level, or, early elementary, I think it's more like 1,500. And not that I think they should weigh that lower, but I think they need a correct number. So I'm more than happy if you see that as important to follow up to make sure that when they meet on the 2nd, that it's very clear that they have the correct information. Peter has already asked to talk to me, so.
yes. And I see you've got the correct language here, but I just want to emphasize that we make sure when we look at the numbers, we're talking at Spanish dual language and transitional bilingual. And I'm just going to tell you that I think we don't have data on how many kids are
I
in
know.
transitional
We
bilingual.
have to estimate.
So we'll have to estimate. And my guess is that there's more in transitional bilingual than there are in Spanish dual language. So just keep that in mind as
Yep.
you're looking for the numbers.
The second one under strategic investments there did not make it to the top, but I thought one of the things you might want to do is to determine whether or not you turn that into a suggested action or task for ODE to do, particularly since the first part of it is more like a research piece, or maybe you suggest that the OEIB Research and Policy Group focus on that. But either way, you spent a lot of time looking at transition for students, particularly as they move forward in this area, and you may want to determine if that's, that you want to at least be ready with more information, even though you're not necessarily raising it to the level of a strategic investment.
Yeah, I'd like to further explore those options, because we had talked in this subcommittee a lot about the barrier, the hurdle that English language learners have at 8th grade, and how if they're really not on track and progressing with their English at that level, we seem to be losing them in high school, and don't seem to be making the progress, and therefore really not going on with their education because of that. So I think I'd like to know some of the options we could
Okay.
use to pursue that.
So I'm going to assume that that's an item Hilda can take both to ODE and OEIB research group and say, where does this belong?
Right.
Because they
Yep.
could tell us better. So the good thing is on all of the rest of these that are not strategic investments, we don't have to prioritize them. We're bringing all of them forward. That's why we just want to make sure they're correct, right?
Yeah, but you're probably going to only really get people's attention on a few.
Okay.
That's one of the issues that happens when there's a long list.
Right, so I don't see in my
Yep.
agenda that we were going to prioritize it anyway. Were you thinking we'd do that?
I just think that, for you to have equal time on each one, you may decide as a group that some of them raise up higher than others, and that way you'll know which ones to really emphasize with the group. My concern is that people lose attention after, about 7 good ideas. They sometimes can't track with you, and it's hard, it's challenging with so much information. So I just want to make sure that you feel comfortable that the committee is giving you feedback on, oh my gosh, Yvonne, these are so important that if we don't bring them up, nobody else will.
Okay.
And it may be that,
This is Kay. Let me understand. All of them are going to be presented?
Yes.
this document that you see here, if we like the format, can be a handout for the entire group, for the entire board. And then Yvonne may want to think about, how she spends her time bringing attention to the ones that the group feels are really, really important.
So something I just realized that I want to call out, it's a little different than how you've put it in the PowerPoint, and that is under each category, we have 3 other subgroups. One is the strategic investments, the other one is potential tasks and policy changes, and the other one is current work that's already
Yeah,
underway.
These are best
right?
practices, yeah.
So I'm just gonna throw out an idea. I'm thinking that the stuff that's under current work underway, that the subcommittee applauds, probably doesn't need as much of our attention at OEIB because it's already underway. Unless you all think there is something you really want me to call out, I will probably not spend as much time on those. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
So going back to, we know number 1, we've already taken forward. Number 2, David is recommending how we're going to handle that one already. So if we go down to the next category, which is potential tasks or policy changes, will you take a look at the 3 there and tell me what you think?
Number 2 is really supporting
Yeah, I was just
other
gonna say it
strategic
sounds the
investments.
You mean these 2 are supporting one another?
This one is supporting another strategic investment that's come forward from another group.
And this one supports that.
Yeah, this one is, okay, so what we're saying right here, right now, because you can't hear us necessarily, is A1 is linked somewhat to number 2 above, but the difference is that this could be exiting at any point in their program. The one above was, remember we looked at the data on the
Before
students
eighth
that
grade.
don't exit before 9th grade and how dramatic those impacts were. So that one was very honed in at the top about what are the best practices that need to be done to stop that or to provide more intervention. And then the other one is simply to support, getting better information out about, well, what is the length of time that students should be in programs and what strategies should be happening generally when they're not exiting.
Seems to me, though, that in addressing it with, well, it's not just an ODE issue, right? It goes across even to early learning and, okay.
So do you want to make that recommendation to early learning as well?
Well, that as well as, I think, there has to be some link of sharing that with higher education, right?
I think the second strategic investment above really
Address.
has more of a link to higher ed, and it's not, I think
Okay.
it is more something for the Oregon Department of Education, really. At this-
Okay.
If we're talking about assigning it to agencies or divisions.
So I'm going to suggest that we sort of group those 2 together and put them as a recommendation to ODE to address.
Okay?
So it's the research.
Yep.
And the communication around that,
Good.
right? So there's not a policy or.
Research and communication.
It's this one and this one. Right?
Yeah.
Because you said this one was really ODE, the number 2
Okay.
above.
Yes.
Okay? How about the next one? That's the one, Hilda, you were saying number 2?
Yeah, number 2 there, help ensure that all students in Oregon have access to full-day kindergarten. This one is really already being supported through another strategic investment. But I remember you all saying, well, we certainly don't want to be silent on that. We want to really make sure that schools are able to provide the PD that's needed and get the funding for personnel and resources. So I think in some ways you're reinforcing strategic investments by another group, but we certainly would keep you informed as we learn more about what happens as a result of legislation and full-day kindergarten.
And number 3 there is the same thing as the number 1 strategic investment, so I think that one we can
Okay?
just take off.
Merge, take it off.
Okay,
Okay.
current work underway that subcommittee applauds, so this is us saying, good job, it's already underway, we support it, we think it's the right work. As a best practice panel, we're saying it's the work that needs to be done. Continued development of biliteracy seal on the high school diploma. provide a Spanish summative reading assessment for grades 3, 4, 5 that aligns with SBAC, Smarter Balance. Any thoughts about those two?
Just to let you know, ODE is convening a group in September to start thinking about the biliteracy seal and to look at what other states have done with that. So we can keep you abreast of that.
I think putting it on the radar like we have when there's so much focus on Common Core and Smarter Balance, I think by bringing it to the level of attention, it's appropriate.
Are you talking about the biliteracy seal or the assessment one?
Both.
Okay.
Okay.
So I will highlight those as ones to pay attention to and call out. Okay, let's move to the next category, student transitions, starting with any potential tasks or policy changes. So these would be ones that we've recommended to OEIB.
You would be bringing it forward to them.
Wait a second, this one looks different. Yeah, so one's ODE. So this is one we are going to bring forward to OEIB.
If you decide this is worth it. Now, the other thing is I could get Peter Tromba to give us a quick analysis and send it out to you all. Because of the new guidelines that were just shared at the last OEIB meeting regarding achievement compacts, it might be good to revisit this one in light of that change. And if I'd had time this morning with Peter, I would have done that. We didn't have sufficient time to talk about that.
Do you think he's ready to do that yet?
I think he
share
could
that?
answer where
Where are we currently?
where we are on this particular piece. So then I could send that out to you as a follow-up, so you could decide, oh yeah, we still need to keep this on our radar screen to talk to OEIB about.
Are you suggesting we would put any of that information in this to report to OEIB?
No, not necessarily. It's just sort of checking to see, is it still relevant?
Yeah, I would say we probably just best just strike those two words, achievement compacts. I mean, that what we talked about last time with the recommendation to narrow the focus of the achievement compacts for K through 12 just down to 2 benchmarks. But we talked about there's still lots of important benchmarks the institutions and districts have to follow, and we by no means say they shouldn't be or they should be ignoring
Okay,
that.
that's great.
I think there's going to be other ways the colleges, universities are looking at this, and I like the idea it bridges high school and college here too. So I think there'll be plenty of other ways to do that, and I think it's important information.
Okay, great idea. So that makes us say that we're going to include all the metrics, not just those 2 that we might narrow the achievement compact to.
Or not just for achievement compacts, for
Right.
other ways of
Other
setting
purposes.
goals and helping achieve student success.
Okay? Any other comments?
Yeah, and it's more just a comment, but
Okay.
one thing that isn't referenced in any of this is building upon the successful strategic initiatives right now. I don't know if this is the paper or not, and I don't mean to birdwalk us, but I look at some of these and I think about the work currently going on where we're starting to see real traction occur. Do we want to reference any of that as continuation of investments? I mean, maybe even the wording at the beginning?
Yep. Sure.
Yeah, I think we can do that. I also think that that gives us another sort of frame for our work going forward, in that we continue to go back and look at what were those investments, what's the work that's come along, are there any outcomes from them, does that inform our work going forward, right?
Yep. Especially
Good
those
suggestion,
dealing
Mark.
with transitions.
Right. Thank you. Okay, let's
That's a
go.
good question. I
Yes.
have a question, but
Yes.
that's a good comment. Are we going, or is anyone going to have outcome information in this process?
So both ODE and OEIB are in the process of already collecting outcome data from every single strategic investment that came through House Bill 3232 and 3233. You got to understand that it's relatively early in the process, depending on the project. Some of them only got funding in, 6-8 months ago. But that is currently underway, and the concept would be that not only will we be reporting those to you all, but we have to report them also to legislators. There's also going to be a February update status report on every single initiative, and I'm sure that that'll also be on the agenda for the OEIB board as well.
Right, even if I don't have clear outcomes,
Uh-huh.
I think if there's trend lines, that would be also important.
Good points.
And I think we also want to, because we're the best practice group, call out what are the practices that people are being intentional about within those. So it's the intentions, it's the outcomes, or the early indicators that are pointing to those outcomes. Did I hear somebody else trying to speak as well, besides Kay? Okay, let's move to page 2B, under that category of transition 11 to 14 years. So these are tasks that are recommended to ODE. Develop a statewide plan for fully maximizing the senior year. This includes access to writing and math classes that support college readiness, and a course that emphasizes college-going skills known to be critical for success, particularly for first-generation college students. Any comments about that one? Mark, isn't this included in your Eastern Promise one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's also a recommendation of good practice from the Accelerated Learning Committee.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to move it.
I'd like to dovetail there, Hilda. I think there's so much work being done with that. I think this one could be strengthened a little bit with the replication grants and with the accelerated learning and finding those common bridges to make it even stronger.
Great. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I figured you'd have something to add with that one.
When have I never not?
Well, I know that one you've done so much work on, so we need to learn from your work. Anybody else comments on that one?
Not for me.
Okay. Kim?
No, thanks for asking.
Uh-huh. Okay, number 2 under that one, establish a statewide task force to revamp and maximize the use of the required individual profile and career plans in 712 to support student progress towards college and career readiness, and ensure that all students in Oregon high schools have access to tools such as career information system and Naviance to support post-secondary planning.
So I have a recommendation on this one. Putting together a task force is one important step. There's a lot of task force already in place.
Yeah.
What may be important for this committee, though, is to ask to have a presentation on what we know about the use of the individual profile and career plan and what the State Department's best efforts can be to use this to support students' knowledge around college and career readiness. Also, I work with a group that's called the College and Career Readiness Cross-Sector Planning Group that includes people from the state agencies that are working in this area. And we've spent some time this year just trying to unpack this and figure out, what do we know about the Career Information System, CIS? What do we know about Naviance? And, how could we support making sure that whatever a student is, that they're using systems that are available? So you could ask for a more intensive presentation next year. That's a transition issue for sure. We also alluded to this in the request from the Accelerated Learning Committee to the best practice to outcomes and investments by asking for collaboration across K-12 and post-secondary relative to a blended advising plan that would encompass all these pieces. I don't know if that's going to reach the level of significance given the number of 30 requests that they received, but you all could at least keep pushing forward with learning about it and then making more specific recommendations.
So are you saying that we would take out the language about establishing a statewide task force and more get a report and find out what we're learning?
Yep.
Is the rest of the committee good about that? We're taking out.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Going along the lines about the last one of just strengthening it, I'd like to see some references towards CTE.
Yep.
Expand this one. And
Yep.
again, I think what that just shows is an alignment to other work, and people will say, oh, okay. Because really, a lot of legislators and folks aren't as familiar with those plans
Yep.
and how important they are. And I love how we're saying, hey, we already have this. We just need to strengthen it and get better at it. And it aligns to your CTE goals and aligns to your STEM goals.
So if I were to change the wording, it could say, provide an update to the subcommittee on statewide efforts to maximize use of the required individual plan and keep the rest of it, and add CTE in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Works for me.
Okay, we'll move on to C, to hire education coordinating commission. The first one is direct the financial aid work group to identify solutions to the barriers faced by students who, due to lack of citizenship, are not eligible for Pell Grants or work-study opportunities. We think that's important. Is there anything to add to that or change, David?
Yeah, at the last Higher Education Coordinating Commission, last HEC meeting, there was a lot of talk with the proposal in the budget to increase funding for the Oregon Opportunity Grant, to also make that accessible to residents who may not have documentation. So
it's being
this is
addressed.
it is being addressed, so it would be very much in line with that.
So would it move to current work underway that the subcommittee applauds?
Well, you could probably add that the HEC wants to see something done about that. So you could maybe even add the Oregon Opportunity Grant into there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to add Oregon Opportunity Grant and move it down here to current work underway, because we know the HEC is already saying they're going to do that. All right.
And do you think at some point, David, you could help connect a presentation maybe from the financial aid group to update this group on their recommendations and processes?
Sure. Yeah, let's work together on that.
I have a question. I think this is addressed elsewhere, but what about students with a modified diploma if they choose to access a Pell Grant? Is that being handled in another committee? Because my understanding is that up until recently, they couldn't get a Pell Grant.
I believe that's been addressed. Kay, can I follow up and send the answer back to all of you?
Yes, please.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that that group is included.
Absolutely. I know that Representative Gelser was very focused on that, and we made some improvements, I know, in terms of counting for graduation, and I believe I read that it was also Pell eligibility. So I'll find out. Hilda to follow up.
And if you find that it hasn't been fully addressed, perhaps we add some language to this one that calls that out.
Okay?
Okay, number 2, direct the Student Success and Institutional Collaboration Subcommittee to address barriers for districts who fall short of eligibility for bridge program funding, but who still need to provide supports for students to ensure their successful transition to post-secondary education. Someone needs to explain that one to me.
This goes way
I don't know
back.
that one.
This goes way back in the fall when you had some presentations about students transitioning. And I think actually, Chair Curtis, you brought up the fact that there were, that if some of the kids fell below eligibility, or the districts fell below eligibility, that those kinds of bridge programs were no longer accessible, and so you were concerned that there was a group of students that might be left out.
I'm not familiar with the bridge program.
These are things like the TRIO programs.
Okay. Trio, now I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about, because that was the one I was referring to. So I don't remember the name of this committee, Student Success and
That's
Institutional.
the subcommittee of the HEC that deals with things like this.
Okay. So do you
I
know?
would suggest that we leave it with heck because I don't know what you're talking about. And if I don't know what you're talking about, I would imagine that'll be true with a lot of people.
So let's take it out.
If heck knows what it's about, then I would suggest that we give that to them.
So I think that's what
Tim,
we're
I think
saying.
that's a brilliant idea.
I think that's what we're doing is calling it out as something we want the heck to pay attention to. So I think our question is, are they already paying attention to it? Do you know, David?
I don't know. I don't know if this committee is, how far they are in this.
So I think we better leave it in if we're saying we want the heck to pay attention to.
Okay, and I'll just put heck in there to make sure that people know it's a subcommittee. The Student Success and Institutional Collaboration is a subcommittee of the heck.
Okay,
Yes.
that sounds good.
That would be helpful.
And probably some examples of bridge program funding.
Yep,
I don't
got that.
know if the whole heck understands that term.
That way if someone asks a question, I can
Yeah.
tell the story. Now I know what story you're referring to that I said. I got lost with all the titles. Okay, number 3, direct that same committee to examine research on the impact of summer drift on student articulation to post-secondary education and share recommended best practice with the best practices student transition subcommittee. Do you know if anything like that kind of work is being done on HEC right now?
I think so.
I can't say. I'm not familiar with any conversation about that. I'm not on this committee, so it may very well be happening in the committee, but at least on the commission, I haven't heard much discussion of this.
So how important do we think this one is? Is this a high priority?
Not for me.
The research that this links to, and I'm trying to remember if this came out of New York or Texas, but when they looked at students, they realized that about 10% of them that were finishing high school successfully, that were saying they were moving on, they'd filled out their FAFSA forms, they'd applied to college. By the time fall counts were done, 10% of them didn't show up. And one of the research projects that was done to turn that around showed that as few as 10 connections, communications during the summer months, right after the student graduates, kept them on track to transition into the college program that they had originally said they were going to go look at, or they were going to enroll in. What happens is we've had it in personal experiences. When I was at Western Oregon, we would have students arrive, believe it or not, they had no clue that they needed to pay housing. And, it's not like that's not something that's communicated. It's just that we haven't effectively helped kids understand these things. And sometimes the students are the ones navigating this information. If the parents and family are busy or they are not familiar with some of the language, it can be very confusing. And so we'd have students who would actually have to go home because they had not budgeted. They had budgeted for tuition and thought they got that all addressed, but they didn't have the rest of it figured out.
So this one, though, is specifically talking about summer drift, which I think is about academics, right? You just gave an example that was funding, but,
It's about staying in touch. Basically, there's a handoff,
okay.
and nobody is with that kid during the summer necessarily to really make sure they stay on board. I've also read recommendations that say, what if the student guidance counselors were paid an amount during the summer to just track the 12th graders to make sure they made that transition? I haven't seen whether or not that's been tried in another place or not.
Either at the high school or the college level.
So I think what's challenging about this one is we're making an assumption that people know what we're
Yep.
referring to with summer drip.
Yep.
I think what you just said about a handoff or counselors, we should probably reword that one if we think it's important to keep as a priority. Otherwise, I think it's going to get lost, especially
Yep.
because it doesn't look like anyone's already paying attention to that one.
I've heard it discussed, but I think clarifying what that means would help a lot.
And do we think then it's still important to recommend that that gets paid attention to?
I think so, and I think it links in with a lot of the other efforts being undertaken already. But
But it
if,
needs
like Hilda
rewording.
says, they're already on track for college at the end of in June when they graduate from high school, yet come September, we're losing 10%. That's something we should be looking at.
Okay? Any other comments?
No, I don't have any other comments. I guess I am struggling, however, about, as we're identifying what we would like to see some strategic investments as a further follow-up, the question of affordability just is hovering all over my head, but I don't want to go there right now because it sounds like we're asking for a lot.
Well, and remember, what we're talking about today are not the strategic investments necessarily. We've kind of prioritized and sent those forward. We're now looking at all the rest of the work that we've looked at and said, what are we going to do with it? And if they do overlap with strategic investment, we'll have to decide in the next year how we're going to move that forward. Because haven't we passed our window of opportunity to add anything else right now, Hilda?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right, to the HEC and the State Board of Education, there's one item to encourage future use of smarter balanced results in lieu of placement tests for students articulating directly to post-secondary education and address policy issues. I know this one is a huge, huge barrier. So just to throw out an example, I know in Washington County, 88% of the students who come to PCC are remanded to remedial classes based on the current placement test. And we think there could be a better link. I think the idea here is if we believe Smarter Balance is the test that's telling us kids are college and career ready, then why wouldn't we just use that one to help kids get placed where they need to get placed?
There is a group called Core to College, which you might want to bring to report to you all in the fall. They have been drafting out some very rough scenarios to say, if this comes to pass, are there some alignments that could be adopted? And this summer, they're going out to the Council for Instructional Administrators, the OEIB group, the writing group of faculty, and a math group of faculty, and the Provost Council, and one other group, I think it's the registrars. So you could invite Lisa Mintz, who is the director of that project, to come and share with you in the fall and just kind of see where they are. In the meantime, this was sort of a placeholder to say, this work is starting. It's not ready to be done yet. But there will be results coming out in the next year from the first administration of the SBAC. And there's been a discussion about whether or not there should be research to follow those students to see if it's starting to predict success when they move on or not move on,
So I think that makes sense to get a report, but I think we should still keep it here as a call out.
Yeah, I think my biggest reservation is this use of the word encourage for future use of SBAC results. I think we used something like examine. In a previous issue here. I think examine future use because
It's a good point.
I mean, it sounds great. I just want to make sure that whatever the high school standardized tests they're completing indeed matches up. And we're actually looking at maybe not this, it should be actually this committee looking at articulation. And I think that's the bigger issue, really. Okay. Articulation standards.
Which is mentioned here.
I think it's coming up, actually.
Well, so you use the word articulating without really talking about the articulation of standards as well. Should we add that to here?
Yes, not just the test, the standards
It's
themselves.
aligning the standards and the test so that students clearly have the smooth pathway with no barriers at these transitions.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're trying to achieve.
I'm glad we're revisiting these.
I know, I'm glad it's not just to you and I here. All these great
I
ones.
have a question. I
Yes.
need to take a phone call from Alaska right at 3 o'clock, and I was wondering, are you going to need a vote on anything today, and if you have a quorum?
We have a quorum. I think we're okay. I don't think we have to vote. I mean, my intention is to take this whole thing forward with all these changes, knowing that even when I'm presenting to OEIB, you guys can give input as to you know, anything that I would leave out. Is that okay? Are you good with that?
That's okay. So yeah, so I'll be signing off right at 3 o'clock to take a phone call.
Okay, thanks for letting us know. So the next one is CCWD's implementation of developmental education work groups recommendations. That's work already underway. What?
So
I think you're okay now.
Okay.
the one comment on this is Elizabeth Cox Brand was the point person on this when she was at CCWD. She has now moved over to the Oregon Community College Association since she presented. And you may want to, I don't know if it's appropriate to say CCWD will be implementing this or OCCA is, but I think what I kind of gathered was you liked the direction of the work and you wanted to enforce that they should continue moving forward and getting updates from them.
So does that belong here, or is that a piece of work for next year, given that there's this change? Should we do, like you've suggested with some others, and that is invite them or do some
Sure.
kind of joint meeting? It seems like it's not very specific,
Okay?
and I know it was a whole basket of stuff, and I know that we had also asked them to go work with higher ed, right?
But
Was
it
that
is
no?
made up of higher ed.
No, there was a group that was not included, remember that?
I don't think it was that group. Oh. That was different. That
Okay,
was very
then I'm
different, yeah.
confused.
Yeah.
All right, so do we think we should leave it here? My recommendation is to move it to work we still need to do before we're
Okay.
clear about what we're
Well,
recommending.
was it a draft report that we had
It
seen?
was a draft report, draft recommendations. They're now vetting those.
Who's
And
they?
They is, well, now Elizabeth has taken that work over to OCCA, Oregon
So,
Community
From
College.
the CCWD?
sounds like we probably should get clear about that
Yeah.
and include it. I mean, if they're already working on it, it's not gonna get left out.
Okay, so just make this an item for potential
Next year,
follow-up next year?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing how quick things are changing, aren't they? It's hard to keep track of all the moving pieces. Okay, we're gonna move to educator quality. The first one, we recommended as one of our top 2 strategic investments, to continue the funding for the minority educator pipeline and recruitment strategic investment with a designated amount for rural recruitment and retention projects. I think this is a great example of what David and Mark were saying, and that is, if we already have some key funding investments, let's continue to recommend they get funded so that we can get somewhere on them and learn if they're getting the work done we expected. So I think here we were sort of making that statement. So we've already made that recommendation. I don't know that it needs to be on the report if we've already made it.
Okay,
And same thing with the other one that we
Right.
made, right? We could take that one off. So already we're sort of focusing ourselves just a
Yep.
little bit. Okay, the second one did not move forward yet, so we're thinking about what is the language we want here and what will we do with it. Support educator preparation programs to fully implement Goal 7 of the English Language Learners State Strategic Plan to include EL basic knowledge strategies into the curriculum for all future educators. So we know that this one is already been approved by TSPC, and we know that they believe it's important. I think the issue is, where is the funding to prepare educators in the higher ed systems who are preparing our K-12 teachers? So I'm going to guess that this one is still a problem if we don't identify funding for it. So how would we report that, say that we think this is important, there does need to be investment in this, so we will be continuing to bring it forward?
okay.
Any other ideas about that one? Okay, Teacher Standards and Practices Commission. This is specifically on, oh, that one was too, okay. So this is stuff they're already working on. So that other item we just did is not in this list because it needs funding. Even though they've
That's
approved
right.
it, it needs funding. So I think that's a huge thing to kind of call out. If we're saying that's really important, and we know it's already gotten through TSPC,
So identify funding. Okay. All right.
okay. Number 1, identify best practices in clinical experiences and embed these in program approval standards. That's the work they're currently doing. Anything else anyone want to say about that one? I got to testify to TSPC when they were considering this one and when they were getting a bit of pushback. And I know it passed unanimously by the time we were done with testimony. So I think this idea is, what we're really trying to say is.
Do you want to take it off then and put as a encourage? Or, that we're supporting it rather than a task?
And underway.
Underway,
That's
work that's
underway.
underway.
So I think what's missing here is the culturally responsive practices. We're just saying best practices in general, but this one.
This was specifically around when you had testimony from the deans and Chalkboard and TSPC, and they all sort of told you there are issues around getting qualified, high-quality cooperating teachers to agree to take a student teacher.
Right.
And it was identified then that they don't really have very much rigor around training the individuals, selecting them, and compensating them.
Thank you, I was confused. Thanks for
Well,
clarifying.
and maybe we should clarify that. I forget, what do they call, they don't call them mentors, but.
Cooperating teachers.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should use that.
It's right here.
Oh, is it?
It's just at the end of the list, so
There
maybe
you
if we
go.
put it at the front, it
Okay,
helps us know.
yeah.
Identify best practices in clinical experiences. So, TSPC.
I could reword that and make it clear.
Is TSPC the one doing that? Yeah, with Chalkboard, right?
They have the ability to embed stronger language in program approval standards. That's why it's there for TSPC.
And
And-
stronger language will improve this? Is that assumption we're making?
When you make program approval standards that have to be met, then at least there is a point at which the institutions have to report on what they are doing to address each of those standards.
Okay.
And there now are annual reports that are due.
So now that you've refreshed my memory, does anybody think there's anything else to add to that except emphasizing that what we're talking about is the cooperating teachers? Okay. All right. Second one is revise annual report requirements for educator preparation programs to include annual documentation of common institutional profiles of programs easily accessible to potential students and future teachers.
So this one relates back to Scott Fletcher bringing you a draft of a document that, to my knowledge, really hasn't gone forward very much, that said, here are some potential things that all of the educator prep programs could easily make available. It could be included on not only their own websites, but it could be something that we use in a statewide recruitment website, which we are moving forward with. And it was determined that one of the ways to really make sure that there was consistency, right now students have to go do their own research all over the place, and it's not easy to find that
Right.
information. So that's why it came up as a potential for the annual reports requirement that TSPC would ask for updates on how each of the institutions have done that.
So
So-
kind of a list of accredited teacher training programs in Oregon?
Well, and it also says,
And data.
what's the admissions for each of them? How long does the program take? There was like a list of profile characteristics for the programs. So if you were thinking about becoming a teacher, you could have a better sense of, oh, if I'm a career changer, these are my better options. If I am, looking for a dual language program, this is where I should go.
If I
Right
want
now, there's-
online
yeah.
or partially
Yeah.
online, just some of those features that people might be looking for.
You know, it makes sense to me, I won't go into it, since the the federal Department of Education's coming out with other
I know.
metrics for teacher preparation programs, and something like this, some common sense, basic things like this make sense.
Okay, that's good to know that we have recommendations that
Go
make
more into
sense.
detail.
As opposed to some other requirements that are
Thank
coming
you.
down.
Yeah, that's a
The other
We
option
get
that
it, we just lived
The
there in
other
K-12 a
option that
lot
you
longer.
could do here is, again, go back and ask Scott Fletcher to come back and report to you on the progress. Because it
Okay.
came from OACTE, and then I know it kind of died on the vine, because so many other things, nothing has moved on that since
So let me
fall.
ask, given what you just said, is there value in us calling it out to help, does that help him and others move it forward? Or do we need to have him report back to us before we know what we're recommending?
You might
to
need
move?
to do that. Have them
Have
come
him
back.
report
That
first?
would be helpful.
Okay, so then let's take this one off until we do that. Is anybody opposed to taking that one off until we have a report?
No, this is Kim. No, please do.
Okay.
Fine.
Third one, align evaluation tools used in educator preparation with state framework for educator effectiveness. So this is if we're doing evaluations on educators in K-12, is there a framework for that in the teacher preparation programs, right?
Right.
So they're sort of already used to that. And I'm just going to throw out there the student growth and learning goals, for example. If they learn how to set a goal around student growth and know how that's going to be applied with those domains, that's the kind of thing we're talking about, right?
Well, it's also that you have every single institution uses their own
Okay.
evaluation system, rating scale. They're not in agreement. And then, when the person gets hired, they are approached by a totally different framework that was approved through the state, because we have educator effectiveness framework now that every district has to use. It's not that they use the very same tool, but they have to address the same framework. So all you're doing here is asking that the ed prep programs also use a similar framework so that you create more of a seamless path for prospective teachers.
So maybe what we could say here is, that framework is a vertical alignment, but it's also a horizontal alignment across the institution. So if we could just describe that a little bit more,
Okay.
so I remember to explain it that way. Anything else on that one? Okay, number 4, form a task force involving TSPC commissioners, educator preparation programs, business and industry, ODE staff, and OEIB staff to identify program content and experiences that could enhance future secondary level teachers' ability to support post-secondary and career success for students. What I remember this one to be is so that it's not just counselors that are helping kids know the kinds of attitudes, practices they need to be successful in post-secondary and career, but that teachers who are teaching every kind of class, for example, in high school, would embed that kind of information in their training. So there's
Around careers, around the benefits of CTE, post-secondary education. I mean,
So this seems like a huge one. Is there a way to narrow it? Is there work already going on this where we could
No.
point to that? Because, for example, throwing out there CTE, maybe is there a recommendation to start with something like CTE? I don't know. I'm just going to say that what I hear in my community is when we ask them, what do you need from us to prepare kids for jobs? They say the soft skills. And I think that's the kind of thing that's there. How to think, how to work collaboratively, how to show up to work on time, how to be a self-initiator. Those kinds of things is what we're talking about here, right?
and it also was specific to the fact that right now in a secondary teacher's preparation program, very, if anything, gets addressed around making sure that high school teachers know enough about FAFSAs and financial aid and helping students navigate that. And yet increasingly, without a huge influx of additional guidance counselors, it would be challenging for students to get answers to questions. We also talked about the fact that nowhere in a preparation program does a secondary teacher, or even below that, ever tour or look at what people are being prepared to do out in the world. I mean, the closest I can think of is BEC sponsors some teacher internships to give teachers an opportunity to understand, what are you preparing students for? You know, what are people being asked to do when they graduate? And most teacher candidates go straight from elementary, high school, college, into a classroom. And unless they're career changers, they've never really gotten a chance to get out there and look at what do apprenticeships do? And how could I help advise students and help them know more about those things? It's a big lift. You may want to hold off on doing this and think about how you could address it. And
I don't know if we want to hold off. I'm just kind of wondering if I'm TSPC, given everything they're already doing and what we're recommending, would we want to have them report back to us? This is kind of a bird walk, but once we share all these, have them get a chance to sort of prioritize and say, here's what we're already working on, here's what we might need resource to do, like the one we called out. Here are ones that we think are good ideas, but we have the bandwidth to do it, we don't have the bandwidth, or we're going to need some help from other places.
And it could tie in CTE teachers there too.
Yeah. Because it seems like a heavy lift when there isn't anything started around it yet.
I agree.
So I think it's okay to still call it out. Does anyone think it needs to be taken off until we do that?
I think form a task force probably going too far.
Yep.
Okay. So it's just
How about
recommend?
identify, what if it was identify program content and experiences that could enhance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So starting there. So we're still giving it to TSPC, but we're not telling
And
them
it could be
form a
to
task
OACTE
force.
as well. They meet regularly together.
So the two of them instead of having all
be.
these other agencies on there or groups? So what'd you say, TSPC and who?
OACTE, since they are the deans and directors for the preparation programs.
The acronyms all.
I know, it also stands for the Oregon Association of Career Technical Education.
All right, so you have what we want for that one?
Yes.
Any other thoughts on that one? Number 5, coordinate ways in which the Network of Quality Teaching and Learning Portal can provide easily accessible examples of quality teaching videos to enhance practice for use at both pre-service and in-service levels. Why is this under TSPC?
No idea. It probably belongs under Oregon Department of Ed since they're coordinating the portal.
Yeah, so we're going to move that to ODE. And I'm wondering if it's really coordinate ways, or do we really want to know what is going on with the network quality? And so do we want this here now, or is that
Update.
another one we want an update on? And
Yep.
then we can
Yeah,
get clear
yeah.
about what the recommendation
Yeah.
is?
Okay.
It's amazing how many times we can talk about these things and still not be clear about what we want to do about them. But
Yeah.
at least we have them captured, thanks to you. Okay, digital conversion. We're on the last page, the last category. To legislators, we're recommending explore the use of future kicker dollars to help fund digital devices for students' use based on a distribution mechanism established by ODE that considers readiness and need. I'm just wondering, didn't we get some information from someone that said don't be specific to kicker dollars, just recommend they identify funds? Because then
Yep.
I thought I heard someone say it'll get too caught up in the politics of the kicker fund. And really what we want to do is say, how are you going to provide devices for kids who can't afford it?
Yep.
That's really what we're trying to do, right?
Yep.
So identify funds.
Ways to help fund. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Identify
Got
ways
it.
to help fund. The second one, explore the use
Same
of
thing.
kicker dollars to fund.
Wow.
Oh, we just got on
That,
it twice?
That seems to be a repeat.
Yep, we can cross off number 2.
Wow.
Okay, Oregon Department of Education, number 1, add additional dedicated staff up to 2.0 FTE to specifically develop and implement a strategic plan that addresses barriers identified in the Power Up report developed by COSA. So we have found out from ODE, I believe, that they are going to have 2.0. They currently have only 0.5 FTE for the whole state around anything having to do with technology, which seems insane given in the era we're in. My question is, we're saying add additional, and they're telling us they're working on it. Do we want to say it the same way?
So maybe you want to take off it, add additional and say,
We support the additional, or the,
provide dedicated staff and take off the up to
Yeah.
2.0.
And that Power Up report was about students having access, or more importantly, not having access to computers
Right.
and
The
other
Power
kinds
Up
of
report-
electronic technology
Yep.
for their learning.
yeah, but it was broader than that. It addressed multiple issues around powering up, period. The first one being broadband access, another one being access for students to devices, another one was digital curriculum and the reviewing of why we have the 7-year textbook adoption that doesn't work anymore. Another one is providing key professional development, which will probably be done through the network to teachers. And then another one was framework. How do we help school districts with a framework of what they need to do to be able to move forward?
And all of this is sort of saying that just like you have a strategic plan around English learners now, there may be a need for ODE to have another strategic plan to guide the efforts in this direction, to guide all these efforts.
And really, the only one we're out of those that we're giving to them is this one.
The last one.
The last one, sorry. Prioritize and provide high-quality digital curriculum and digital assessments in lieu of the previous textbook adoption cycle. I'm wondering, do we want to say something about what you just said? So if you have provided district staff, wouldn't we also want to say, kind of where is the ODE strategic plan around it? Oh, sorry.
there.
Sorry, it is there.
Yeah, and isn't that included a lot in number one then?
Yes,
Previous-
sorry, I just missed that. You're right.
Yeah.
It is there.
It seems to me it's included in that, and it may not be necessary to call out by its own.
Oh, so you're saying number 2, maybe too specific?
Well, what we know is number 2 is actually in the Power Up report. So if
Right.
they're going to use the Power Up report to develop their strategic plan, then what you're saying is correct. It should be included in
All right,
that.
okay,
We could give it as an example. For
Example.
example.
got it. This is
Okay,
good.
we're at the end, and Hilda, what do you need from us? Do you need, you've got your notes, you don't need a summary of what we're taking out or whatever, you
No,
got
I
that?
think I've got all of it written down, and I can get this done. I can name this
Tonight.
tune, and it might not happen until the end of the week.
Okay.
But that way, you all could take a look at it if you wanted to give it one more look over.
Okay.
And then I guess the only last question is,
Who's gonna-
we've been talking about the fact that PowerPoint fatigue seems to be setting in, and that maybe it'd be best to provide, this type of a format, which is why I spent some time this morning formatting this. You could see what it might look like. Do you like the way it reads? And then, of course, I would make all the edits on this that you just went through.
So the only thing I'm wondering that might even make it more concise is, do we need the colored categories for them? Those were for us as organizers around our scope of work, but is that really necessary? In other words, could we put all of the strategic investment ones in one place?
Okay.
All of the ODE things in one place, all of the TSPC, you see what I'm saying? Just trying to think about how to organize it so it makes sense for the committee.
Yeah,
You like it like this?
I kind of like it broken
Okay.
up like this.
All right.
Because then you see in those categories which ones are investments and which ones are not investments and which ones are work underway.
Great.
I think it helps.
And
to look
keeping
at them
these
as a group.
colored categories, that was
That's what
what
you
she
said.
was asking about too.
Yeah,
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 that's
that's
what
what
you
I
said.
meant.
Did somebody else on the phone want to add a comment?
And
Well, this is Kim, and I liked the format. I thought it was very easy. I got the other one as well, but this was very easy to read, so thank you.
I
Okay,
think you'll redo every part of it again, and then we can analyze it some more.
Thank you, Mark.
like-
I'll call you this weekend so you can help with that.
Exactly, I'm just harassing her, I agree with Dave and Kim, I think it's good to go. It looks very good, it's nice and concise, and I think it really encompasses a year's worth of work.
So I have a question that's a process question, and maybe it's a Hilda and Seth question. But are we asking OEIB to vote on these? Or are we saying we're telling you we think these things are important, we're
Okay.
moving them forward, and we would like to know, are you with us? Do we have a thumbs up on it? Do you have some questions, some clarifying questions?
So I sought advice on that this morning in
Okay.
our directors meeting, and I think one of the things that you can do is when you talk about this, you can say, you know, these are things that we think are moving forward, that we're excited about, and you don't have to go much into depth on that. And then there may be some things that you really want OEIB to say, by golly, yes, we support the best practices committee in their recommendation here. And that's where I thought you probably want to kind of know what your top ones are that you think are going to make a big difference, or that are really, really important. So it's more than just information sharing when you get around to particularly the tasks and the policy changes.
So this is the part that's always difficult
I
for me,
know.
given our different categories, and I had this problem when we did the strategic investments too. Prioritizing within a category is easy. How do you compare apples to oranges across the categories and really prioritize? Seems like it's challenging, especially given that now, I think we have, 4 of us on the phone? Not the whole committee? So I did put a star next to some that I heard people say, absolutely, this is really important. And that was under K-12, the yellow part. At the bottom, 1 and 2 under current work underway.
But you don't have to ask for them to prove that.
No.
Well, I would add to
Oh,
that,
I like
that
that
at the top of the strategic investments, the one about the 8th grade, that moving
Okay.
beyond the 8th grade with ELL, because we did spend a lot of time
Trade pens, so I can
in
mark
previous
color.
meetings discussing that, and it seems like it's a huge barrier, and it's really affects a lot of students.
So let me ask you another question, Hilda. What do we need their support on? None of the current work underway then? It's really
No,
the
it's really saying, we're asking some agencies to take on something, and you're getting their blessing to ask that.
Okay.
And it would come from OEIB then, that the best practices and the full board recommends that you do X.
So it feels to me, rather than asking that on different items or trying to prioritize, that maybe the best thing is to ask them to take a vote on it and to pull out any they think are not as important.
So I could do this in 2 ways. One is I can format all of this with the changes and give a space next to each one so that people get like, I don't know, their top 1 in each category maybe? Or,
I don't
would
know
say
why we
top
need them to
2 or 3.
prioritize.
I think sometimes limiting it
Yeah.
to 1 from each categories. I don't always see the priorities as equally distributed across the categories. So maybe top 2 or 3 are what.
and
do you
the
think's
other
workable?
recommendation is I could get that from individuals, send it back to me, tabulate that, get it to you, and then you still have the morning meeting before we present. The problem is then your handout.
I guess I'm struggling even myself to make that prioritization across, because some of them I know a lot about, and some of them I'm
Right.
trusting the rest of you who've reported out, and
Exactly
You know
where
what I'm saying?
outcomes and investments feels.
but we've already made the recommendation for investments, and some of these are going to different places, so why we have to determine which one of them is more important. That to me feels more like if you're sending a bunch to one agency, and that's where we said they need to prioritize and bring them back to us.
I thought just the importance was not to put on paper, but just in your presentation to the board, the subcommittee's report, in a 5-10 minute presentation, just that you had a few focus areas. That was my understanding, just to call their attention to.
So give them the
In
whole
oral
paper.
report. Yeah, just
But
in
in
your oral
oral, say, I
report.
want to draw your attention to
Yeah.
these.
And then they could lend support for the document.
Yeah, so maybe just one starred item from each person on the subcommittee, just to help you select some things.
Okay, and then when I'm done with that, what am I asking them to do? Vote on the whole thing?
To support the motion to support this document.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
think. It's
right.
supporting the whole document.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is a to-do item for the committee. Everybody has to pick one they think is real important to call out. That will be the one I talk about.
And I can send this out to Lynn and to Kay to make sure they get their choices in.
So that will help them on the agenda, right? Because that cuts
Yes.
down the time we need.
Right. Okay.
All right. So we've called out several things that we think ought to happen for our scope of work for the next time. So I'm going to summarize a few that I remember. Let me know what if I missed some. So one was to follow up on the recommendations on these recommendations that we're making. So one would be to follow up and say, what's the work on these? The other one is follow up on the strategic investments. How are those going? The other one was to look at the transition, what's going on at those transition points from early learning to K-12 and from K-12 to higher ed. Because there's a lot of new work going on, and so we kind of want to report
Yep.
and distill the best practices. What else? What else did we say?
You want the
There's a few
research
reports.
groups to come back and talk about best practices that are making a difference for students transitioning from EL to,
Right, so that's EL.
yeah, EL. And you also wanted an update on the efforts around the individual career plan.
Yes.
And you wanted,
We talked about joint meetings in addition to these follow-ups with early learning and HEC.
yep, I'm just going straight through and saying, where
Okay.
did you have follow-up? And then you might want to cluster them. Core to College, you want an update from them on the alignment work around SBAC and placement, and an update on the OCCA Developmental Ed Work Group, and then an update from OACTE on institutional profiles. I can also provide you an update then on the recruitment website. That'll be ready by then. And
We said the network, but
Update
that's
in
part
fall
of
to
the key
ODE.
funding.
oh,
Teacher
the portal.
network.
You want
Yeah,
the
the
portal.
portal.
Right.
So it feels to me as an
And
organizer
then
that
ODE for what they're going to do with the units that they're adding around
ODE.
technology.
I mean tech, yeah.
There, you've got an agenda.
And did you also get TSPCs in their prioritization?
Wasn't there an update on institutional profiles?
Yeah, I got that
Okay.
one, OACTE and TSPC.
So I'm just thinking that I like the way we've organized around these color-coded pieces.
Yep.
So I think if we stay, we'll have some continuity. If you remember our work plan and how it was color-coded before this chart. So what we could do is use that same organizer, and we could start to plan out how all of these pieces fit across the year in there. And we could bring that to you as a draft,
Yep, in September.
September, in a
Okay.
couple weeks. Sound good? I know it sounds like a lot, but I think we're moving forward on a lot, so let's not stop the momentum there.
You have public testimony.
Okay? I just want to make sure, so that's our scope of work. The other question I started to ask is the presentation. It sounds like I'm going to do the presentation to OEIB because now it's fairly short.
Then you can invite comments from any of their members
Right,
who are
invite
there.
the rest of the
Sure,
members, because
sure.
I'm not going section by section now, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Looks like we're at public comment and we're very much ahead of time. John, will you pronounce your last name so I can say it right?
Niebergall.
Niebergall
Yep,
from Sherwood High.
yep,
Thank you very much.
yep.
Thank you.
Hello, Chair Curtis, board members that are here and on the phone. I'm John Niebergall from Sherwood High School. I'm a classroom teacher on a special assignment right now doing a mobile Bowman Fab Lab. During your talk, your lavender topic, educator quality, and your red one, digital conversion, kind of struck me. What I'd like to share with you, I know I only have 3 minutes, so what you'll see in this little video clip is what we're making with some teachers, I'm nervous, sorry, around best practices with students. It's a rough cut. It's around digital fabrication and communicating with students between different schools, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, community colleges, and industry people. The video is 10 minutes long, but I know I only have 3 minutes. If you want to see it all, it's pretty good. You're going to see CTE teachers, students in industry, and the impact on them. In Oregon, we're trying to build an ecosystem around career and technical ed with high-wage, high-demand jobs. And this is a piece that's going on right now.
Can I
Will
just
you
ask if
forward-
Representative Reardon is aware of your work?
Yes, I spoke with him a little bit.
Okay.
I know he's working with Don Domes on teacher tech programs.
And myself and a couple of other folks
I'm
too.
working with Portland Public,
Cool.
and we don't have teachers to fill the STEM
Right.
and to replace myself. This doesn't talk about my project, but I'm going out and teaching teachers how to create fab labs and get equipment. And so if you have more questions, I can give you more.
Will you forward the link to us?
It's not public quite yet.
Oh, it's not,
They're
okay.
still editing it a little bit,
All
but
right.
when I do, I will for sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Randy Huey, and across my working life as a career and tech ed teacher, we've seen programs diminish and go away all over the United States. They're expensive, they cannot service as many students at any given moment, and it's hard to find qualified teachers. When I was a high school student, there were wood shops and construction shops and metal shops and automotive shops, very specialized ways that students could make things. My colleague Tim Pike and I here at Sitka High School, T and I had been talking for many years about what are the ways that we want to integrate the use of computers in controlling tools to manufacture things. When we saw the ways that laser cutters, 3D printers, and CNC vinyl machines could be used to manufacture things, we recognized a good idea when we saw it. Here is a way to do manufacturing without creating a new lab, and doesn't take anywhere near as specialized a teacher or a facility. With just a regular classroom and a few relatively inexpensive tools, you can make a place where students manufacture things. This laboratory was created 2 years ago as a place for students to both design and create things. This lab with this tooling isn't so much industrial, it's a bit more educational. Nonetheless, they make real things and they solve real problems using this software and this tooling.
I'm Harry Hartzog. I go to Sitka High School and I'm in the Fab Lab program. So Tim comes to me, he has a basic sketch and I used Rhino to help take that and make it three-dimensional and show all the moving parts and how they would work. And the idea is that you can strap the commodities to it. So during takeoff and landing of the aircraft, they won't shift.
I was really amazed how he took my basic idea, and converted it into this thing and looked at it in ways to make it better. We're talking about this college to career readiness. Yeah, I'm ready to hire this young man right now.
Because the manufacturing industry is now a global enterprise, a designer working on a screen in their office sends a file to a manufacturing plant in Thailand who makes the product. This is the way manufacturing happens in the 21st century. Sherwood High School and Sitka High School created a partnership to sort of simulate that. John Niebergall and I created a project in which students worked in remote design groups.
Each school, depending on what kind of technology they had, they could make the part
and then ship it to one
Right in
school
3
or
minutes,
seven.
so
For students to
you want the rest of it, or-
in a classroom is awesome.
You can send it when it's finished, though?
Yeah.
Because I know we like to see it.
Whether it's in close by.
And then everybody could see it.
Right.
School in
We're waiting for
another
him to
state.
finish production.
That's.
So do you have an ask of us, or is this kind of to highlight
I just
what's?
want to share, I saw that the topic today was best practices, and I wanted to share with you that there's some things in our state going on right now.
And I'll probably call you, because we're trying to do this Forest Grove High School. Maybe we can form a link. That's my other hat, sorry.
Yep.
Can't forget one hat when I'm wearing another. Thank you,
So,
John.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
All right, Tamara Bush?
Johnson.
Johnson, sorry. Tamara Bush Johnson from Business Education Compact, BC. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a hard act to follow. Goodness. Talk about personalized learning, application of learning. Wow, great. And of course, I used to teach in Alaska, not now, so I'm very proud of that
That's right.
area. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'll have to really talk fast because I have a tendency to really get involved in what I'm going to talk with you about today. And I'm really following what you did from your July 9th meetings, your minutes, where I think, Chair Curtis, you talked about those 3 things that you want to impact on key outcomes on the Achievement Compact, underserved populations, which strategic investments are most transformational, and then the third one is which strategic investments have the potential for the most return on investments. So those are 3 areas, I'd like to just talk briefly with you about. I've been an educator for more than 35 years, and I have seen really good programs come and go. Many times good programs have fallen off because they didn't have that continued funding. They really never really tried and true. They were just, a short term and then they were gone. But not much has really moved the needle in all these years of trying to change education. Because we're really trying to just touch around the edges instead of really looking at the systemic and cultural change that will transform schools. So for the last 10 years, I think there's been some really significant research. Tom Guskey, Marzano has really come out, and I'd say the last 10 years, and across the nation, school districts have been implementing this new research and doing pilots. And so there's not enough data yet to really have that direct outcome. But I'm talking about competency-based, proficiency-based education. And competency-based proficiency education is where kids are really engaged, like in that video, engaged in their own learning, that students have hope, they have enough time to really learn, that they have hope, that they're not stupid. We've talked to students, from one of our high schools, middle school. She had failed every middle school math class, got to high school, and she really thought she was stupid and never would be able to go on to college. And she thought she would fail everything until that school really, practiced our proficiency-based teaching strategies. And so she said, I too have hope now. I know I'm not dumb. I can finish school. I want to go to college. And so there's hope for every child, not just some. Teachers are well equipped with training and they are supported in their roles as a facilitator of learning. And they are trained in use of standards, writing good assessments to those state standards or national standards, and they're really good at measuring student success and growth. These are schools where students who don't grasp the concept are not left behind as the class moves on, but rather that they are really they're given the immediate interventions and help where they need it. And these are schools where students who are about to drop out because they're bored, because they are forced to stay in a class when they should be far into the next class or perhaps even taking community college classes, but yet they are there because we are not moving students along when they're ready. And these students are now...
Tamara, we're at 3 minutes.
Are you
so
kidding?
If you
No way!
Wrap it up.
I will. Okay, so we have great returns, and I won't talk to you about, but they've addressed all of the concerns in education, the initial return on this investment. But what I really wanted to mention are 2 things. As a result of House Bill 3233, a small amount of money, $415,000, was invested through the House Bill 3233 for demonstration sites in Oregon to really test these best teaching practices. and to further this project. It was too short a time frame. It's just really beginning this fall. We don't have the data. So I asked two things. One is invest again in these best practices and allow for a sufficient time to have the data to come back to you and say that it works. And secondly, that you specifically mention proficiency-based, competency-based teaching practices because it's not a program. And so if you just say invest in good programs, so whoever implements, if it's the Oregon Department of Education, needs specifically to know that you're in support of these best practices and you want to give it enough time to prove. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're finished for today, so I adjourn the meeting at 3:35. Thank you. Thanks Hilda and Seth for driving up here to support us in our home place.
Thank you
So I
for
can
the
get to
water.
my board meeting.
Mark and Kim, are you still on the line?
I am.
Great, so expect that you'll get a document in the next few days, and you can take a look at it and give Yvonne your top priority. Thank you so much for participating by phone.
Thank you.
Thanks.